Welcome back to EduTogether at Home. This is Aryeh Eisenberg, EduTogether's CEO and founder, and I'm privileged today to be joined by Mr. Ben Koch, the assistant principal of the upper school at the Adelson Educational Campus in Las Vegas, Nevada. So Ben, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Looking forward to it.
So for those people who have never had the privilege like I have of being out in Las Vegas to visit the Adelson Educational Campus, could you give us just a general idea of what the school is like and what it's like to be a student and or maybe even a faculty member at the Adelson Educational Campus?
Sure. Well, at the Adelson campus, we are education for life, so 18 months through 12th grade. And I work with the 6th through 12th graders. At our school, we are a pluralistic Jewish community, and our students participate in athletics. They participate in our startup incubator. They have their traditional core classes. They study Hebrew and Judaic studies as well. And it's a pretty robust community that I'm excited to live and work in. A lot of people are always surprised when you say that you live and work in Las Vegas, Nevada, but I'm here to tell you that it's a vibrant and thriving educational community that we have at the Adelson campus.
It was so funny you say that, Ben, because I think the first time I came to visit the school, I was also thinking that, like, how do people do anything in Las Vegas other than what you see on TV, the casinos and the Vegas Strip? But I have to say, I can tell you, walking into the Adelson campus is certainly just a privilege. It's a beautiful building, a beautiful school. I always come back for my school visits, and I say to my wife that I wish my kids could go here. It's such a great school. So thank you for all that you guys do to keep it going. The last few months have obviously for schools all over the world been different than any of us could have ever imagined going into September. I don't think anybody really planned on having to deal with the issues that some of us are still dealing with. When you found out that learning was going to be transferred or transitioned to the online format, what went through your mind, and what did you as an administrator do with your team to start getting the ball rolling and to get things off the ground?
Yeah, so I think for us, our sort of process started in late January. We saw what was happening globally, and during one of our admin meetings, we put sort of the topic of coronavirus and school closures at the top of our agenda. And it was interesting at that point in time, just because there were so many different things that all of us were feeling. That this is nothing to worry about. This is something we should worry about. And we were all just trying to make sense of it. At that time, no schools had really shut in the United States. There weren't cases anywhere locally at that point. And I think what we committed to was really the thought exercise, really around the idea of, if for any reason, if there was a flu outbreak or something like that where we needed to close, like, what would our position be? And really from that sort of arose this idea that we wanted to be a school that continued the learning regardless of the disruption for whatever reason, for whatever time period, instead of maybe being reactional. And so what that kind of led us to do as teams is to talk about, like, what that would mean. For us, 6th through 12th grade, our students have one-to-world devices. And so, the idea of, is the technology in place? Like, that was a box that was easy for us to check. But I think the larger...
They had it already.
Yeah, they had that already. But the larger question then became about, like, preparing for that. Like, our students remembering to bring it to school and back to school every night. And then really thinking about, like, what are all those other supplementary materials that, like, students and teachers need to start thinking through. If you're relying on, some sort of textbook or workbook to be physically in the class every day, if you have to close the school, that's not there anymore. And so, In,
Sure.
in both divisions, we started, a list of what do students need to take home and bring back every night and day, and et cetera. Now, this was just in theory. This wasn't in practice yet. This was just
Right,
like,
right.
if we
Get
were
ready.
moving in a direction, what would need to happen? And so, I'm not a member of our lower school team, but I can say things look quite different. And at that point, they identified, that there's technology that lives in the classroom, but that technology was not going home and coming back. And so, in that
Okay.
regard, it was sort of, for them, it was the understanding that if we start to head down a path where it looks like schools are going to be closing, for the younger students in our school, it's not so much just a quick transition. It's going to require, really a ramping up of a couple of weeks of building the habit of taking things home from school, bringing them back, or else it would be, a little bit chaotic. And so, that was like, late January, the conversation started. February, we really started thinking more of it, but it really is just a thought exercise. It's just like, if we needed to head down this route, like, what could we do tomorrow and what would take preparation? I think it
It's the
was,
if factor, as they say.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
And as we moved to late February, and there started to be cases, I think there was maybe one case in late February in Nevada, but at that time, schools in our association, Northwest Association of Independent Schools in Seattle, I believe in late February had closed because they had local outbreaks. And so we were really looking a lot with what they were doing and the ways in which they were prepared for this, the ways in which they were caught off guard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was, I don't recall whether it was like the last week of February or the first week of March, but we dedicated our two Monday meetings, I believe, to working with our staff. Like, what are the protocols that we need students to start following in case we have to make the decision at a moment's notice to close the school? And B, like, what are the protocols you as the faculty members have to start following? Sometimes faculty members are like, I don't want to take my computer home. I don't want to do work, not sort of
Right.
understanding that, it's possible that,
You're
and
not
really,
coming back tomorrow.
yeah. And this I'll tell you, this really did seem absurd and overreactionary in early March that we were even talking about this. I mean, I don't think anybody was upset about it, but I think it really was, there certainly were opinions, and rightfully so, that were just like, is this really
It's
necessary?
ridiculous.
And
Yeah.
and of course, like, we don't know. Like, we hope it's not necessary. We don't want to close the school. And so I think it was, I want to say like mid-March, we made a decision based on our peer schools and networks, Jewish schools and local private schools. We made a decision on Thursday that we would, move to remote learning. And I think a week and a half, 2 weeks prior, that's when the students had really started their taking everything back and forth. And so
Okay.
it was Thursday evening that the decision was made. Teachers were allowed to come back and work on plans that Friday and work through any technology issues that they, needed to work through. But then, we started, it was at that time 3 weeks before spring break, Passover break. And so, we were looking at, just this idea that we would do this for 3 weeks. It was very temporary, the idea, at least, of the online learning. And I'll say,
I think a lot of Jewish and Christian schools kind of went through the same thing. Okay, well, this will get us to Easter, this will get us to Passover, and then we'll be
yeah,
back.
yeah.
So
And a couple things I'm remembering about that. The state's governor did not close public schools until the Sunday after the Thursday we had announced closure. And so I know, that just kind of added to the, are we making the right call? Which ultimately we believe it was. We had set up, we had students taking things back and forth. We were hearing from our parents, just that their concern had increased significantly given what was happening in the news. And, so our students, started remote learning the same Monday that, every school was supposed to transition. But I know that because of our planning and thoughtfulness, what was, true in our community is looked different than what was happening elsewhere. I think earlier on, we had also talked about, there were conversations around asynchronous learning versus synchronous learning.
right.
And one of the things we had, and we had a great, debate, just like talking about like what are the reasons to consider, one or the other or blended, et cetera. And one of the decisions we made was that we wanted to maintain a synchronous learning schedule. And so we really, we took our current schedule, we cut out the things that, needed to leave, sort of the, like the 6, like community periods, if you will.
Right. The
The
non-essentials.
Yeah. I guess I can say like we didn't cut out things that teachers were leading. It was like we removed student clubs, we removed, different like enrichment opportunities, but we still kept like the electives, art, music, theater,
Okay.
technology. That was able to stay, and we're really excited about that. But, we developed a 4-class schedule. And, we really asked questions like if students are learning at homes, what do we need to be true? And so we had a later start because we knew it was already sometimes an issue to get students in person early in the morning, but especially when they're at home. So we had a later start. And then we also thought about the length of time. And so we had a block period. And so our classes were, quite lengthy at 80 minutes. And we really talked about like how that would translate online. And we didn't have a good feeling that would go over well. So we moved to 45-minute classes with good breaks between, since students are at home, if they, want to, take care of an errand, clean up the room, get food, whatever they need to do. It was different because when we're at school in person, there's a much more strict schedule. You have 5 minutes to pass periods. You don't have 20 minutes, 15 minutes in between just to, do whatever. But we felt that there needed to be flexibility just because of all of the unknowns. And so, we announced Thursday closure, Friday teachers prepared, and then that Monday we launched our full schedule.
Wow, that's amazing.
I'll give a shout out though, because I think it's really important. I've had the privilege of working with you for the last 5 or 6 years, and as a school,
privilege has been mine, Ben. So
mine and our students. I've learned so much about what online teaching is, and I've observed classes, I've heard from students, I've spoken with teachers, and I think that experience taught me a lot about what online learning is. And so when I think back to those conversations where we were, trying to figure out what learning should look like, and I think about what ended up being our product versus what other schools came up with, I really do think that a lot of the lens I was looking through came from the experiences that I had working with Bonin Biakad, EduTogether. And it was just very exciting for me. And I think when we talk about the students making that transition, the reality was that with the exception of our 6th grade students, 7th grade and up had all had online classes at some point. And so I really, I'll just share, I mean, sixth graders, we know that developmentally they're in a different place than our older students.
Sure.
But 6th graders were learning on time for the first time ever. And their learning curve was much higher as a result versus our 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who really just jumped right into it. And I really, it's not lost on me that their experience with online learning, and plus our students who were already learning with your teachers, made that transition flawlessly. And, really, I thought it was a bright light and kind of a challenging moment just to know that, like, while we were sort of upending all of these other things, there were some things that continued on exactly as they had been. And I thought that was just really, it was awesome from my perspective.
I think it says a lot. I mean, it's been really has been a pleasure to be working with you for so many years. I think I remember, Ben, when both of us had less gray hair, and like we were both a little bit younger back then. But
a little bit.
But it really has been a great journey. And it's interesting that that your observations really led to some of the decisions that the school made. What I think one of the most difficult questions to ask in this type of situation is, what would you do differently? Looking back now, or even as you go into the September, I mean, obviously it sounds like you guys did a great job and you made that transition when you had to. You were thinking about it from the start, which not every school did, so that's quite amazing. If you had to go back, or if we do get into a situation in September or August for you guys, and we're still in this situation, is there anything that you guys would tweak or change up for the next round?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from what happened after spring break when it became clear, that we were going to end the school year like this.
Yeah.
At that time, we were excited with what had happened for the 3 weeks. Frankly, we were also exhausted because it was,
I'm sure.
brand new, and essentially, even
do you want to come work for us? We have a job for you here. Well, now that you know what goes on.
No, I like it in Las Vegas. I'm good. But so the shift was, though, we did what we did for 3 weeks. We became an online school overnight, and we had prepared for some of the logistics and the technology. We were good there, but it was hard lessons. It was every teacher and every student was their first day of school, their first 3 weeks of school all over again.
Sure.
And that's that's kind of like what you anticipate school to feel like in August when it's starting. This is it's going to be exciting, but it's also everything is new. But you had to go back and reset norms and redo that. So kind of in thinking about next year, I think I would think back to the shift that happened after spring break when we really just said, all right, we're in this for the long haul. So what are those questions that are unanswered still? We had talked about, how do we need to revise our attendance policy to keep students learning and also be responsive to, immense challenges. If you just look at our local community, our state has the highest unemployment rate of any state in the United States. Our city has been, very much impacted. And so, we had a committee to talk about attendance. We had a committee to talk about assessment. It was important to us that, students were learning, that they were accountable, that when we, issued quarter 4 grades, which we did, that they were truly representative of things students were accomplishing. And so, we kind of had to again, develop what does assessment look like when we're remote. Prior to spring break, there was sort of a, we'll return and, kids will be in their seats, we'll return and kids can take that test, and
Right.
And it really, that was the shift, was saying, instead of holding on to, and of course we hope we can be together, but it was that
Realistically,
it was that moment where you let go of the, I hope we'll just be together because then we don't have to solve it. I think it was that moment where it was like, this is something we have to have an answer of as a school. We have to have our philosophy and we have to do that. And so when I think about next year, that's what it is. It's not just,
right.
What happens if we have to close the school? Are you taking your iPads home every night? It's really like, what are our rules to operate in person and what are our rules to operate when we're remote learning? And then I think the bigger shift for us, specifically 6th through 12th grade as we're looking for next year, is the creation of hybrid learning for the 2020-2021 school year.
Sure.
And really asking that question, our understanding, first we'll have to follow all, local guidance as far as health and safety protocols go. And we, are optimistic that we'll be opening in person based on all of the information we've seen and also what we know are our own abilities, to provide physical distancing for students, to limit class sizes and movement, all of those things. But I think the bigger reality when we look at the next school year, 2021, is that the walls of our classroom are going to need to expand. And so we're looking at the idea of helping our teachers teach both in person and also online simultaneously. And it's a wild idea until it's not. And so that's why, we're really thinking about what does that look like? If you can't roam around your classroom like you used to, but you're teaching from a more stationary, instead of writing on your, whiteboard, write on the smart board that's also, shared via Zoom with your students and recorded.
It's not so crazy, Ben. You know, we're working right now with a lot of schools really around the world who are looking at similar hybrid options. And, you know, it's tough because, as I'm sure you guys have seen, you have teachers who are great at their job. They've been doing this for 20, 30 plus years. And all of a sudden they're being asked to do it differently. And that's not an easy thing for anybody, for any profession, certainly not for education. And you know, it definitely requires that what we call the virtual hand-holding,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
which
and
is important.
I'll give a shout out to our teachers right now. They are phenomenal. And I think one of the things
They are. I just want to let our viewers know that Ben's not just saying that. They
they're
actually are
awesome.
phenomenal. We've had the chance to get to know a lot of them, and they really are great
I,
people.
I,
So
I think something that worked really well, if based on the comments I've heard from teachers, is I think they responded really well to our leadership's transparency in early March, where we said, we hope this doesn't happen. You know, we don't even think this is going to happen, but if it is going to happen, like, here's what our thinking is. And, you know, teachers at that time were allowed to ask like a lot of questions, you know, like what are the parts that would excite you? What are the parts that, you know, make you want to not teach anymore because, you know, this is
right.
hard and this is challenging. And, you know, I think by sharing that in early March, I mean, that Friday that teachers had to come to school, the atmosphere that day was the teachers had known for several weeks, like, what are the things that might be expected to them. They were really able to ask like very targeted questions. They knew
That's
what they were
great.
on the hook
That's great.
for. They didn't show up that Friday and they're like, so online learning, where do I start? They showed up and they're like, I've been thinking about this. How do I share this? I've been thinking about this. Is there an application that can do this? And again, like, it was a stressful day because, you know, we're answering information from students, parents, someone, you know, doesn't have their laptop charger that we thought did. You know, it was a stressful day, but just knowing that, like, our teachers had been provided with the information they needed so that they were coming that day to get what they wanted, to test what they needed. It was a very exciting first day of online school. Just like going into
That's incredible.
classrooms, it was cool. And then one other thing I'll talk about with the teachers, not only were they awesome in their classrooms, but the first week we did a community Kabbalat Shabbat. We lit candles together.
So interesting.
And it was that was a 10-minute program Friday evening of our first week. And, you know, I think we had like 250 people log in on Zoom. It was
Wow.
awesome.
Amazing.
And after that, though, like, we said, hey, like, this could work. And so each week, I mean, we did all of the normal community programs that we did. We, you know, the lower school students had a Kabbalat Shabbat program in the morning. Upper school students had one in the afternoon. We had all of our award ceremonies moved to online. I was just today filing, you know, I'm getting ready to return to work. To my office. So I was, you know, arranging my papers and just looking through the scripts and how we had sort of, you know, become, you know, some likened it to like a, you know, TV production studio via Zoom, you know, like transferring cameras, following scripts, you know, displaying videos.
So cool.
We have a tremendous archive of the work that we did as a community that I don't know what we're going to do with it. Of course, we shared it with students and families to, you know, remember the moments. But, you know, I think professionally, I can just say I have immense pride with the work the Adelson campus did spring semester. And I can't say enough about the people I work with in the community and how amazing they are.
You should feel very good, Ben. In all seriousness, you know, what you're describing, I can tell you personally, does not happen in every school. And there have been so many educators around the world who have been struggling with these things. I think you bring up such a good point about the Friday Kabbalat Shabbat programs you did. It's one thing to be able to maintain your academic curriculum, to be able to keep the schedule going. But one thing you do, you know, lose, or certainly is a challenge when you're in the online environment, is that sense of community and is that sense of student-teacher connection and all the things that we do get. Are there any other programs that you guys instituted or that you did to make sure that those kind of things didn't get lost in this transition?
Yeah. So in the middle school, we had virtual lunches. Um,
Yeah, that's cool.
it was an interesting idea. I think for some
Who
students,
supplied lunch? I just want to
well,
know.
virtual. So
Virtual.
essentially, it was using the breakout rooms feature in Zoom to invite students to kind of a lunchroom. Myself and our school counselor and our librarian were sort of, there. And sort of as the students would filter in and out. We only did it for 30 minutes. We get to check in with them. How are you
Fantastic. It's a
doing?
great idea.
Sometimes they say, hey, I made plans to meet, four of my friends. Can you put us in a breakout room? Sure. But like, it was nice to check in. We observed a lot of classes just to kind of see how teachers were, adapting, but I think more importantly to like see what support they needed. Like for students, if a student, is struggling to follow the new norms, figuring out how to support them. So we were seeing them there, but it was just nice to check in like we would, at lunch with students. And sometimes students would just stay in the
Oh, nice.
lunchroom with us and just, how's it going? Just like they, would at normal school. Other
That's
things
great.
that we did, we have a startup incubator, and one of our programs is that several students who are already enrolled in electives there, we actually sent 3D printers to their homes, and they helped print.
Whoa, you
Yeah,
guys are great.
yeah. So they helped print, and these are like very like committed, serious students who had enrolled in these
I'm sure.
electives and are like destined for really exciting projects in this field. But they took the incubators home and they created the headband holders for the face shields. And then some of them also printed the, if you have an ear mask, the things in the back that hold that. And those
That
were
is the
donated.
coolest thing I've ever heard. But by the way, Ben, the fact that they were able to do this from home thanks to the school, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was exciting. And again, I mean, not only shout out to the students, but to, the teachers who, observed distancing protocols to, be like the only person in a room, like fixing a printer and then like dropping it off. And
Mm.
we really, they went above and beyond. We had material return for, school supplies, computers. And, it was always fun when a student would pull up and they're like, here's a 3D printer.
I
It's like,
love it.
wait a second, let us get a special cart from that. We can't just like throw that in the book
Can't.
box.
Yeah, that's not gonna stack too well, right?
Yeah.
That's that's amazing. Are there any like applications or any one specific tool that you look back on and say, "Thank God we had this"?
Yeah, Zoom. Certainly we've learned a lot about, the benefits, the features, and we've also learned a lot about like what it means to be safe in an online environment. In the
Sure.
same way that our school, does so much to protect our students when they're physically in the building. It's also understanding, that moving to an online school means many of the same questions. How do we safeguard who has access? And so again, I'll tell you, there was a lot of different information at the time about, which online video conference was better, safer,
Oh yeah.
had more features. And so sometimes it was challenging to have those conversations, but I think it also like, showed us as leaders, like, are we, can we speak to our choices? And our answer was, yes, we could, which I think was a very, invigorating feeling. So I think Zoom, just without a doubt,
For
was the
sure.
program
Definitely.
that made it happen. We have a learning management system. We use EDSB, and I think that was a pretty flawless transition in the same way that teachers would post, do there as a record of what happened in person. Teachers continue to use that for their grade book and posting a record for what happened virtually. That was our way to communicate. That was how Zoom links were shared. That was how assignments were shared and turned in. And then, I think also some teachers who had not been using Google Classroom started using it a lot more. Some who are already using it used
Okay.
it in different ways. That's kind of a compliment to EDSB. They do and are capable of different things. But I think those are sort of the those were the musts. I think we really would have been scratching our heads without those programs.
No, I think I totally agree. I mean, Zoom here we are, and I think they really helped a lot of schools to be able to make
Yeah.
this happen. And I can tell you from experience, I agree, EDSB is a fantastic platform. I think the schools that have platforms like EDSB really are seeing how useful and important they are,
Yeah.
you know, especially since we're not all in the building, not everybody's together in the same place. So
I
that's so important.
and again, I think that's where like part of our, yes, it was a lot of new learning. Teachers were learning how to teach online. Students were learning how to attend all online. But I think what made that possible, as seamlessly as it worked for our school, was sort of the foundation that had been laid prior. The creation of One2World. Did how that work change? Yes. Devices that used to be stored in classrooms got sent home for younger students. Things change with that. But we had those things in place. We didn't, mid-March, we weren't like, what's an LMS? Like how does each
Right.
teacher get things, to students with a great post? It was, flawless. As a school administrator, that
It's
was how I
amazing.
shared our community events with parents and students. It was, hey, here's a reminder. This is what's coming up tomorrow. Here's the link that you can join. We'll see you. So I think one other thing I like a learning piece I'll take away just with those community events, that's been on my mind since I mentioned them, is practice. We spent so much time practicing those events before we did them live.
Really? Oh, that's
And
so
I
funny.
think that was always the interesting idea, was that for every, Friday Kabbalat Shabbat program, we had a Thursday or a Wednesday practice where we like did the whole thing. All the students who were speaking had to come and speak. All the faculty who were, playing a song or had a video, it all had to be done, and we
That's so
would just
interesting.
experience it, together. And, I think that was what allowed us to have, we did programs for Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut. We were able to do those because, we spent so much time not only preparing, like, here's what we want to happen, but making sure that we were prepared. Everybody knew the order of events. It was really exciting.
That sounds incredible. It really does. Mr. Ben Koch, the assistant principal of the upper school at the Adelson Educational Campus in Las Vegas, Nevada, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It sounds like you guys have an incredible school, and that you did an incredible job in this difficult transition. Hopefully we will all be back to normal in September, but we'll have to see what happens. But it sounds like you guys are ready to meet the challenges ahead, and we really do wish you the best of luck. And sounds like you're still doing amazing things even with these challenges. So amazing to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great day.